Now to a CNN exclusive. U.S. Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger is speaking out for the first time since Paul Pelosi was attacked. In the wake of that day, Chief Manger is painting a grim picture of the climate politicians are now facing. How would you describe the threat landscape right now against lawmakers?
It's probably as bad as perhaps it's ever been, and certainly since I've been here, I've seen the threat landscape get more and more serious in terms of the numbers of threats against members and the types of threats, even just the things that members are dealing with when they're here, when they're at their home districts, some of the threats that they get. So just the level of hate speech, the level of violence in our country directed toward political officials, government officials, it's really at a point where I think that it's as dangerous as it's ever been to be an elected official.
Dangerous as it has ever been. That's pretty alarming, Alex.
It sure is, and it's all the more alarming because it's not terribly surprising, right? That we've heard it from members, we've heard it from candidates, that the way their families feel under siege, the threats that come in to their young staff, just abuse pouring in over the phone lines when they're featured on certain television programs or targeted on social media. Members of the 1-6 committee who needed to have cop cars stationed at the end of their driveway because of the death threats pouring in, and of course the attack on Speaker Pelosi's husband. It's incredibly dark, and Pam, the thing that I find most sort of disquieting about the whole thing is there's no real end in sight, right?
Exactly.
That Chief Manger can talk about what the options are for sort of beefing up security at the Capitol or responding more assertively to individual threats against individual members. But we're looking at a bigger cultural problem here that is obviously not within the power of the Capitol Police to solve.
Right, and sometimes members within Congress are making the problem worse.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is really the responsibility sometimes of lawmakers to be careful about what they're saying, right? Because people are listening to them, people are looking up to them, people take cues about people that they're targeting. I think that is the scariest part of this, is that if you tell the public misinformation, then the public receives that information, starts to believe it, and it becomes really hard sometimes to undo that. I mean, I think January 6th is really the pinnacle example of that. People were fed lies about the election being stolen, and it fueled people to want to do something about it. People who went into the building that day believed that the election was stolen.
And there are still so many Americans who believe that. I actually asked Chief Manger about January 6th and whether he has the resources to prevent another insurrection. Here's what he said.
Right after January 6th, there were a fair number of after-action reports and Inspector General reports that listed all of the things that went wrong, listed all of the failures that people determined occurred. And so it was really a checklist that we could use to, as we started trying to prioritize how we were going to improve things, it was a checklist that we could use to just sort of knock it off the things that we needed to do to ensure that January 6th never happened again.
So clearly changes have been made. They went through that checklist, but they only have so many resources. And that has always been a theme coming from Capitol Police. There's money in the omnibus for them. But, he talked about how, look, in some cases they've had to outsource and put 40 to 50 outside unarmed guards at secondary points of the Capitol to check credentials of people already in so that they can move the officers elsewhere to secure it.
I was struck by how thinly stretched they've been since January 6th. And for those of us who go in and out of the Capitol, I actually had no idea prior to your interview that those folks who were manning the doors now were not security guards at this point. And he also mentioned, I think this is really important, that they had to put so much attention on that January 6th checklist, on protecting members there, that's partly how they got into a situation where they weren't paying as much attention to guarding their homes, guarding them when they're traveling. And that obviously came into play with the situation with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Exactly. I think in many ways, you could say it was a wake-up call because they had been so focused on protecting the perimeter that you have a situation where, according to a letter from a House committee, and Chief Manger confirmed that they hadn't done an assessment on Speaker Pelosi's residence since she became Speaker a second time. That really says a lot about how essentially bogged down they were. Now, I do want to mention, we don't know in 2018 what they offered in terms of security options, what they should do, whether those options were approved. There's still a lot we don't know, but it is telling.
It certainly is. I mean, and the fact that we even have to have this conversation about how stretched thin the Capitol Police Force is, that if we increase the size of that force by 5 or 6 times, like sure, the Capitol would be safer, the members would be safer day to day, but then what kind of Congress would we have, and what kind of ability would members have to interact with the public or with the media, right? That I don't think anybody sitting at this table, and almost anybody serving on the Hill, wants to go back to the days of the Capitol being an armed camp as it was in the days after January 6th. But God, if there's not some kind of a bigger change in the way our culture interacts with our politics, that may just be where we end up headed. Right,
exactly. And I asked him about what Kevin McCarthy has said, that look, this is about management, not adding more people. He's indicated he wants the magnetometers to be taken down that were put up. And Chief Manger basically said, look, they put it up, they can take it down. A lot of people have advice on how to do my job. He is in no easy position.
Well, exactly. And when you think about the fact that these members are, yes, at the Capitol, maybe Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday, but then they go home, and protecting someone in their district is a whole nother challenge that is, I do not envy him for having to try to figure out.
And he couldn't get into specifics, but it's clear they're looking very hard on how to beef up security for members when they're in Washington, but also their residences and the family members in their residences when they're not there. So really interesting analysis. Thank you all.